Hello, children. Welcome to another exciting day of math. So, today we are talking about quadrilaterals. The other day we talked about polygons. I asked you all what a four-sided figure was. You all said square. You all got it wrong. We laughed. We cried. Now we know that all four-sided figures are called quadrilaterals. But today we're going to talk about specific types of quadrilaterals because, like people, not all quadrilaterals are made the same, which is good. We don't want everything to be made the same. So let's start very broad and we'll narrow in on some more specific things as we get to them. First off, we have a parallelogram. Parallelogram. And a parallelogram is opposite sides are congruent and opposite angles are congruent. Okay, so opposite sides and opposite angles are congruent. So that would be something that looks like this, where I have two congruent opposite sides, and my angles here are also congruent angles. Okay, so that would be a parallelogram. My opposite sides are congruent, and my opposite angles are congruent as well. Now moving on, we have a rectangle. You're probably saying, I already know what a rectangle is. What a waste of a lesson. But I want to be very specific. There are specific terms for each of these things, and so it's good to know what each one actually is and what it, how to define it. So a rectangle is defined as a parallelogram with all right or 90-degree angles. So it's a parallelogram, which means that the opposite sides are congruent and opposite angles are congruent. It's a parallelogram with all right angles. So here we go, right angle, right angle, right angle, right angle, congruent opposite sides, and other congruent opposite sides. Okay, so a rectangle is very specifically a parallelogram with all 90-degree angles. All right, next, moving right along here. Next we have a rhombus. And a rhombus is a parallelogram with four congruent sides. So a rhombus is a parallelogram, but all four sides are the same measure. So the angles, just like a parallelogram, the opposite angles will be congruent, but the four sides will all be the same measure. I don't know if that's going to do what I want it to. Close enough. All four sides are the same measure, and then my opposite angles are congruent, and my opposite angles are congruent. All right, look at that. We're just cruising right along here, waiting to go. So we got parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus. Let's move on to everyone's favorite, a square. A square is a parallelogram with four congruent sides and all 90-degree angles. 4 congruent sides, all 90-degree angles. So a square is a mixture of a rhombus, 4 congruent sides, and a rectangle, all 90-degree angles. It's the combination of both of those two things. You have all your sides are the same, and all your angles are 90 degrees. That is what makes something technically a square. So, in this form, a square is a rhombus because it has the 4 congruent sides. So a square is a rhombus because of the 4 congruent sides. A square is a rhombus, and a square is also a rectangle. So if something's a square, it's also a rhombus and a rectangle. But I can have rectangles that aren't squares, and I can have rhombuses that aren't squares. And so I can, but if I'm having a square, it is a rhombus and a rectangle, and a parallelogram, and a quadrilateral. Squares are lots of things. They don't know what they are. They're very confused. All right, next we're moving along. We're going to get away from some parallelograms here, and we're going to talk about a trapezoid. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral right now I can hear Quinn arguing in Miss Williams' class. I believe it's about bee swarm. So, Quinn, when you're watching this, know that I can hear you. Give it up, man. Be done talking about bee swarm. A quadrilateral with one set of opposite parallel lines. So trapezoid is a quadrilateral, but it only has one set of opposite parallel lines. So something like this would be a trapezoid because it has a parallel line here and a parallel line here. They're not the same measure, but they're parallel. They're never going to touch. Another example of a trapezoid might look like this, where again I have, that's not what I'm looking for here. Let's go with something like that. There we go. So here are some more parallel lines. These lines are both parallel, going in the same direction. So trapezoid is not a parallelogram, but it is a quadrilateral. And then we'll go one more. Let's go with a kite. And a kite is a quadrilateral with adjacent, which means next to, congruent sides. Okay, so a kite has two sides that are next to each other that are the same measure, and then two other sides that are next to each other that are the same measure. Let's maybe draw it this way. Let's leave it like this. And I go, okay, this side and this side are congruent, and this side are congruent. And my congruent sides share a vertex. So when two sides are next to each other and the same measure, that is called a kite. Okay, so that's specifically what a kite would be. So knowing all of this, let's say I drew a shape and it looked like this. What would be the best name to describe this shape? Well, there we go. This is a rhombus. It also looks like it could be a parallelogram, but mostly it's a rhombus because of my four congruent sides. So yes, it is a parallelogram, but more than that, it's a rhombus. All right, so we're going to be talking about and identifying our quadrilaterals tomorrow in class. But for now, hopefully you have this nice, good list with all the shapes on it ready to go, written in your notebooks, so you don't have to find a picture off Google and try and cheat while we're doing our work tomorrow. Not to call anyone out, but you know who you are. All right, I will see you guys all tomorrow. Bye.